Just first off, just welcome and thank you guys so much for. I want to thank Pastor Don and Adrian for holding down the fort the last month. They did an awesome series on love. I hope you guys are taking part in that. Yeah, let's give it up for Pastor Don and Adrian. What a cool gift and privilege and wonderful thing that we have, where we can have these just excellent speakers come in and help out and lead us and teach us. I learned so much during that series. I was so inspired by the stories and the different lessons that we learned. So I just hope you guys were too. But I'm back. I'm excited to be back up here with you. I'm excited to be able to share with you God's word. I've been excited for this series for a while. I've been excited to just share with you kind of something that God has put on my heart. And it's the stories where Jesus sits down to meals with people in the book of Luke. And there's so many of these stories. There's so many of these little moments throughout the book of Luke where he just has meals with people. And it feels so ordinary. It feels like such a normal thing. And when we think about Jesus, we often don't think of the ordinary, we think of the extraordinary. And yet he found these simple acts, these simple moments, like sharing a meal, to do extraordinary things and to make extraordinary points and to show his love and his mercy and his grace to the world and to people who needed it. So today, we're going to be talking about one of these experiences, an experience that he had with somebody who became one of his first disciples, a man named Levi, who we'll later know as Matthew. Okay, so you might know in your Bible, there's a book of Matthew. This is the guy that we're about to learn about today. Matthew, that name actually means gift from God, okay? And so what you're going to learn about Levi in a few moments will surprise you that his name was later a gift from God. But it's significant. The act of sharing a meal is significant. We've reached a point, I think post-pandemic, we officially crossed over the 50% threshold. More people now eat alone for the majority of their meals than sit down and eat with other people. More people now will sit down and stare at a screen, stare at a phone, watch TV, than will sit down with their family or their coworkers around a table. And yet, the studies have shown that people who eat more often in community, eat more often with other people, are much less likely to suffer from depression. They have lower rates of obesity, and they actually tend to be more productive than people who sit and eat alone. So the next time you are sitting at your desk, eating a burrito, scarfing it down, trying to type with one hand and dripping sauce and queso onto your keyboard, just remember that the people in the kitchen having a meal together may just be more productive than you because of that meal. Just the act of community, of sitting together and talking and laughing and sharing stories actually can make us more productive. Now, I know that Jesus cares about obesity and he cares about depression and he cares about our productivity a little bit, but that's not why he was sitting down to meals with people. Can we all agree to that? There's none of these stories where he talks about, you should maybe eat a little less, you might lose a few pounds. It'd be nice. Maybe that's Evan chapter 2 in the Bible. But Jesus knew the significance of the table goes much deeper than that. Jesus knew what being invited to a table means to people. He knew that it meant something to sit down with someone, to belong at a table, to sit with someone and share a meal. He knew what it meant to the people he sat with, and he also knew what it meant to the people who were watching. He understood that by having dinner with someone, you are telling them that they matter. You are telling that they're important. You're letting them know that they have value and that they're wanted. The way I can kind of put this into normal terms, or terms that we can understand this morning, is I want us all to think back to when we were in school, okay? Some of you might be thinking back to like Friday, okay? That's okay. Some of us, this might take a little more brain power. Think back to when you were in school. And maybe like the first day of sixth grade or the first day of high school or one of those moments. Maybe you moved when you were in school and your first day at a new school. And that moment when you walk into the cafeteria. Do you remember looking around that room and seeing all these people who knew exactly where they were supposed to go? There was the cool kid table, and there was the nerd table, and there was this table and that table, and whatever generation you grew up in has their own different terms, but you know what they are. And you're standing there and you're wondering, where do I belong? Where am I supposed to go? I remember I moved from a really small town in Michigan to South Florida when I was a junior in high school. And my school in Michigan, my entire high school was about 600 students. When I moved here, my graduating class, just my class, juniors, was about 1,000 students. And so there was this definite sense of culture shock and change where, like, when I went to my other school in Michigan, everybody knows when there's a new kid there. And I remember walking into my first day in a Florida high school, and I'm thinking, oh, everybody's going to know I'm new. Everybody's going to look at me. People are going to ask me where I'm from. People are going to think I'm weird. And I remember walking in and just being a face in the crowd. And I loved it. I loved that I could just blend right in. I remember sitting down in one of my classes, and I talked to like 3 people around me, and it was all of their first day, and they were all from different countries. I'm like, okay, I'm not as weird as I thought I was. Like, this isn't so bad. Like, I belong. Like, it's okay. But I remember I could be a wallflower. And at that point in my life, that's all I wanted. I wanted to just glide through. I wanted to finish high school and get out. That was my plan. I just wanted to get out. I didn't want to make friends. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to get through these next 2 years and get out. And I remember going to lunch, and I would go to the cafeteria, and they had this outside wall that you could go up to and get pizza. And then I'd go sit on a wall all by myself, and I'd eat my pizza. And I'd wait for that bell to ring so I could go to class and just get through the day. And I did that for 4 or 5 days, and I was okay with it. And then one day I'm sitting there and I'm eating my pizza, and this girl named Jaleesa comes over. And she walks over to me, and we had a class together, so she must have noticed me in that class. She goes, hey, I know you're new here. Do you want to come to our table? I'm like, okay, sure. And I go and I stand at her table, and the next day when I came to lunch, I had a place. They were waiting for me. I belonged at their table. And so all of a sudden, I had friends, and I belonged, and I mattered to someone. And it was just a simple invitation. Hey, do you want to come sit with us? And for the rest of my time, I had a place where I belonged. And I just remember the feeling of going to school that next day and knowing that this day at lunch, I have a place. This day at lunch, I have a people. I belong. That's what the table represents. That's what Jesus knew. He knew the power of an invitation. He knew the power of sitting down with someone and letting them know they matter. They're important. And so we're going to look at the story of this man named Levi. And as we read this story, we're going to see how the call that Jesus made to Levi, this call to join him, to follow him, changed everything for him. So let's turn in our Bibles to Luke chapter 5, 27 through 32. It says this, after this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. Follow me, Jesus said to him. And Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to the disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but to call sinners to repentance." Now, in order to fully understand what's happening in this moment, we have to understand what it meant to be a tax collector in that time. Because, we don't like taxes, right? Nobody really likes taxes. It's coming, right? April 15th is almost here. Just, this is your reminder, okay? This is officially me reminding you, start working on your taxes. It's depressing. But it's not the same. If an IRS agent walked in here, I wouldn't throw rocks at them. We wouldn't chase them out of the building. It's not their fault that we have to pay taxes. But in this society, tax collectors were the most hated people around. And I want you to understand why. And I can't think of a comparison. Not a good one, that would make sense to all of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to describe what a tax collector was, and I want you to come up with who is a tax collector in your world. Who is someone who fits this description for you? Okay? So here's how the tax system worked in ancient Rome. So Jerusalem was conquered by Rome and occupied. So Rome had taken over, and their government was now in control. And so they began to levy taxes against the Jewish people so that they could rebuild their armies from all the losses that they incurred when they came over and took over, so they could build up temples to foreign gods in Jerusalem and all around the cities. So they could build their statues to Caesar and all their different kings and rulers. But also so they could rebuild Rome, and they could build bigger statues and bigger towers and bigger buildings. So they were taxing the people. So the emperor of Rome would set a tax of maybe $1,000. We'll use our terms. $1,000 from every single person living there. But the emperor was smart. He knew if he went to go and collect taxes, eventually someone would come and get him. He was not going to be well liked. He was definitely not going to be loved, and somebody would get him. So he appointed governors. And these governors were Roman officials who would then go, and they would go to those territories, and they would live there. And they didn't get paid by the government. Instead, here's what they would do. The emperor would say to them, as long as I get my 1,000, you tax the people whatever you want, and you keep the leftovers. So let's say this Roman governor, we'll call him Claudius, he's living in Jerusalem, and he says, okay, as long as the emperor gets his 1,000, so I'm going to charge 3,000 to every single person living in Jerusalem. I'll take 2, I'll send 1, and I'll get to build a nice big castle for myself. But Claudius also isn't dumb. Claudius knows that if he goes around as a foreign invader, occupier, somebody somewhere is going to try to find him and get him. But if he builds up big walls with all his money, he can keep himself safe. So instead, he goes out to the Jewish people and people who are starving, suffering, dying. Maybe they just want to get on the right side of Rome. And he goes to them and he says, hey, I'm going to make you a tax collector. And here's the deal. The taxes are $3,000. I'm not going to pay you, but you can charge whatever you want, and you can keep the leftover. As long as I get my 3,000, I'm happy. So now, somebody who went to school with you, somebody who went to church with you, somebody who grew up with you, a brother, a friend, someone whose families used to do Thanksgiving together, somebody who used to go to weddings with you, is now starving your family and profiting from it. A brother, a friend, a neighbor is now getting rich while everyone around you is starving and suffering and dying. And you're watching this blood trader build their little kingdom on the backs of people they're supposed to love and support. Now, can you imagine why people hated tax collectors? These people working for a foreign government coming in and betraying their family and their neighbors and their family's name and the honor of their family, all so that they can build their own little kingdom. I think it would be pretty hard if you were a tax collector to show up to church the next Sunday after you just taxed somebody's grandma out of everything she had. I'm sure it would be difficult to show up to synagogue or to show up at school, drop your kids off at school when the other kids are all starving because you and your family is eating the choice meat. This is what tax collectors were. Everybody hated tax collectors. You'll notice throughout the New Testament, whenever it mentions tax collectors and sinners, tax collector always comes first. Even before sin, you can be a sinner and that's all right. We can deal with that. Just don't be a tax collector because they're blood traders. It's the worst kind of person. And so now we go back to our story and we see this tax collector named Levi literally sitting at his booth as Jesus approaches. And I've got to imagine like the disciples in this moment walking with Jesus up to this booth. They probably know Levi. They're probably familiar with him. They at least know what he does. I'm sure Judas was there stuffing the coins in his back pocket, trying to hide anything he could. I'm sure they were trying to stuff bread up their sleeves because they knew Levi was about to take everything they had. They were going to sleep on the streets tonight because Levi was going to take everything they had. And as they approach this booth, Jesus says 2 words: follow me. And Levi leaves everything behind. Now, I'm assuming, and this is just an assumption, but I'm assuming this is not Levi's first encounter with Jesus. My guess is he had probably heard Jesus preach at some point or teach at some point. See, Jesus would travel around and he'd go to hillsides and crowds would come to hear him teach and preach. And I'm sure Levi at one point saw the crowd heading out, and maybe he went there to collect taxes on people that owed him. Maybe they'd been in hiding. Maybe they'd been running from him, and he thought, if all these people are going to go up on the hillside, this might be a good opportunity. Maybe he just went because he was intrigued by this passing teacher. And at some point, he heard Jesus preach, and he sat there. And just think about this, because I think we've all been here before. He sat there listening to this message of hope and forgiveness and love. And I'm sure he sat there and he thought, that sounds so good. And as the whole crowd listens and shakes their heads and nods, I'm sure he sat toward the back thinking, I want that too. And then that voice in his head started to say, but you're not worth it. That's for all of them, but you're a traitor. Look at the things you've done. Look at the mess of your life you've made. Look at the people you've hurt. No one, not even this Jesus guy, could ever want you. I think there's a lot of people who come into churches every Sunday all around the world who hear these messages and hear about the hope and the love that Jesus has, and they go, yeah, that's for all the rest of these people in this room, but it's not for me because nobody could love me. That's where Levi was. He sat there and he thought, I am too far gone. I am too broken. I am too messed up. There's no way. And so he went back to his tax booth. And I'm sure that message rang in his head over and over and over. And he thought, if only someone could love me. And then suddenly this Jesus guy approaches his tax booth. And it took 2 words for Matthew to leave his entire life behind. Follow me. Because at that moment, Matthew knew, I'm wanted. There is hope for me. The gospel isn't just for everyone else. The good news is for me. There is hope for me. It's interesting, in the book of Matthew, his book, he records these 2 parables. And I want to look at these parables with you. These are things that Jesus said, and I think he recorded them because they ring so true to him. He said in Matthew 13, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all he had to buy the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for pearls. And when he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had, and he bought it. Matthew has found something more valuable than anything else the world has to offer. He found something more valuable than what Rome could give him. The good life on earth, the money and the fortunes and the fame and the food was not going to satisfy him the way that Jesus could. The love of Jesus was worth selling everything. When he found Jesus, everything else suddenly became obsolete. He said, I am willing to give this whole thing up to have just him. Just a relationship with Jesus is enough for me. And Levi immediately leaves everything to follow Jesus. We then see that he throws a party. And for Levi, who's going to come to a Levi party? Everybody hates him. The only people who are going to show up are people like him. And so he throws a party, and the house is filled with tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus and his disciples. And they show up and they celebrate and they party together. Matthew invites the wretched refuse. It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's the kind of people that Levi associated with. And he said, I don't know who else to tell about Jesus, so I'm going to tell them. And Jesus shows up at his house. Jesus is unafraid and unabashed to walk into a tax collector's house in a room full of sinners and sit and eat a meal with them. Of course, this grabs people's attention. This catches the eye of the religious people, and they all show up. They come outside and they want to question Jesus and his disciples, and they ask him, why are you eating with tax collectors and sinners? Jesus answered them, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but to call sinners to repentance. There is no one that Jesus could sit down to a meal with who didn't need his healing. And so when Jesus looks at us, he's not ranking us on a scale of worthiness. He sees us all as sick. All of us are in need of him. And he wants to be there for us. He didn't come for a bunch of right people. He came for a bunch of broken people. He came to love and fix and restore broken things. They go on to challenge him, these Pharisees. And if you know what a Pharisee is, they were these kind of religious but also cultural leaders in their towns. And so they not only knew the Word of God, but they kind of set the culture for everybody else. And they were very much separatist in the idea of, we're going to keep things separate. We're not going to associate with things that are sinful. And to give them the benefit of the doubt, this had served them well in the past. There were many times in the Old Testament where Jerusalem was at risk of being forgotten. They had been conquered and taken away, and the only thing that had kept them and their culture alive was people who were devoted to it. People who said, I'm not going to marry into this culture. I'm not going to worship these foreign gods. I'm not going to do these foreign things. I'm going to come back. Someday I want to get back to Jerusalem, and I want to practice my religion my way. They believed in this idea of holiness. They wanted to be set apart. But the way that they practiced that was, let me set myself away from anything that is sinful. But when Jesus shows up on the scene, he's holy. And yet he goes into all of these sinful places. And the reason is Jesus had a different understanding of what it meant to be set apart. You see, they believed, that the Pharisees believed, if you go get too close, if you rub shoulders too much with a sinner, if you get too close to unclean things, your holiness will be taken over by the uncleanliness of those things. Okay? If you eat unclean food, it makes your body unclean. If you deal with unclean people, it's going to make you unclean. Jesus, though, he would go to these unclean places, and he wasn't afraid of becoming unclean. Those places were afraid of becoming holy. You see, Jesus would walk into a bar. It sounds like the beginning of a joke. Jesus, if he walked into a bar, he's not worried about getting drunk or being seen with the wrong people. The people in the bar need to be worried about that becoming a church in a minute. Because he's about to change lives in that room. Because his holiness doesn't get infected by sin. His holiness infects sin. His holiness spreads into sinful places. This is why he calls himself a physician. A doctor doesn't run from a sick patient. They run to them. A doctor doesn't look at someone with the flu and go, oh, I'm sorry, I can't treat you. You have the flu and I don't want to catch it. No, a doctor says, I'm going to go in that room. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to help you. And that's what Jesus says. He says, I'm not afraid to be infected by your sin. Your sin needs to be afraid of what I can do and the holiness that I'm about to bring into the room. So Jesus went places. He would touch lepers. These people that their skin was infected with disease, and if you touched them, you would catch it. And so they were cast out. They were sent out of towns and villages. They had to live together to suffer in loneliness and pain until they died. And Jesus would walk right into their camps, and he would reach out and he would touch their skin. Because Jesus wasn't worried about being infected by the things of this world. He was worried about infecting them with his holiness. This is why Jesus could heal blindness. He could heal brokenness. He could heal sin, the ultimate infection. Sin is a curse. It's a disease that infects us. It grows inside of us. If you let it get a little bit, it's like a cancer. It'll take control. If you let it grow, if you don't treat it, if you don't deal with it, it's going to grow and it's going to take over. And the only thing that can help that is having a physician come in and cut it out. And that's what Jesus does. But when you do that, when you live like Jesus, when you go to places where sinful people are, when you go to places where brokenness is, the religious people get upset. The Pharisees go on to challenge him, and they say, you know, John's disciples, they fast and they pray. This is John the Baptist. They say, so do our disciples. But your disciples keep on eating and drinking. Basically, what they're challenging Jesus with is, you don't look, your religion, the way you're living, does not look the way it's supposed to. You're having way too much fun. You're celebrating way too much. Your disciples are living it up. And it doesn't look like the somber, sad religious life that we have. You see, when we fast, we suffer. It's all about taking things away, and we need to walk around with sackcloth and ashes on our heads and look miserable. And when we pray, we make sure that everybody can hear it, and it's oh God, we're such a mess. Oh God, this world is so messed up. But when your disciples are praying, they're rejoicing and they're celebrating, they're having a good time. This doesn't look like church. That's what they're saying. You're not behaving the way we want you to behave. Jesus, you're undignified. You and your disciples aren't religioning the way you're supposed to. Jesus answers them, can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and in those days they will fast. Jesus was bringing up this metaphor of a wedding, and think about maybe if you were married at some point, if you got married, guys in the room, bachelor party. Were you guys mourning on your bachelor party? I hope not. I hope you had a good time. The idea is to have a good time. Your wedding day should be a great time. It should be a time filled with joy and excitement. I remember my wedding day. We wanted to just keep going. I remember at our wedding, we were having so much fun. We're like, let's pay whatever it takes. Let's do another hour of this. We're having so much fun at the reception. We're like, let's pay for another hour. And as we're having that conversation, the DJ starts playing our last song. We're like, oh. So we drove off, and we let the people disperse, and then we came back, and we hung out with our friends for a couple more hours that night. Because we were just having such a good time. You don't go to a wedding to mourn and cry. You go to celebrate. And Jesus says, I am the groom. I am here on earth now, and these are my boys. Why would they be mourning when I'm with them? But he says there will be a day where these guys are going to mourn. There's coming a day where they're going to feel the loss. They're going to experience that. Jesus is talking about his crucifixion. He's talking about the day where he will go to the cross and he will die. And his disciples, they mourn. They spend 3 days fasting and praying and mourning and suffering, thinking that everything is lost and that this whole thing was a failure. But that's not how the story ends. Jesus comes back. Now, when the bridegroom comes back, do the people keep mourning? Do his disciples keep mourning, or they begin celebrating again? They do. They begin living a life of joy and commitment and devotion to him again. And listen, people, Jesus is still here. We are not living in the time of mourning. We are living in the time of celebration. Church should not look like a funeral. It should look like a banquet. If we're coming to church and we're miserable, something isn't right in our faith. We have not captured the joy of the salvation that Jesus has given us. He is here. He is the groom. He is with us. Let's celebrate. Let's have a party. Let's have a good time. And I don't care what the religious people say about it. Yeah, it doesn't look like the way you're supposed to do things. Jesus never did. he ends this conversation with these two parables. Luke chapter 5, 36. He tells them, no one tears a piece out of a new garment to patch the old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new one will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins, and the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, wants the new, for they say, the old is better. To our modern ears, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But to the Pharisees and the people around, they would have gotten this immediately. They would have totally understood what Jesus is saying. Now, the first part is pretty simple, and we can capture this. You wouldn't go to Abercrombie & Fitch and buy an $80 pair of jeans to cut a patch out of it to put on your $30 pair of, Levi's, right? It makes no sense. You're ruining both. And the reality is, a new patch on old clothes is going to rip and tear because it can't grow the same way those old clothes can. It can't stretch to meet all the tenstyleness of those old pair of clothes. And so eventually that new patch will just rip right off. And Jesus is saying, I am not here to be a patch on the old way of doing things. You cannot take me and just slap me onto your old life and think it's going to fix anything. I cannot come into your life and just be a little bit of a solution. I would say, if I was going to make this parable a modern day, Jesus is not a Band-Aid that you can slap on a bullet hole. It's not going to solve anything to just put Jesus in a part of your life and hope it's going to fix something. You cannot apply him to your life as if it's going to solve something, but only give him that piece of your life. You have to give him everything. This is why Levi was willing to give everything. He left everything, and that's the only way that you can be transformed. It's the only way you can be changed is if you surrender all. Now, wineskins. This one's really weird, okay? This is a wineskin. Now, this obviously is not a old school wineskin. They didn't have plastic tops on theirs. But this is it's a wineskin. It's made out of leather. It's made out of animal skin. Wineskins, now wine was everywhere, okay? Everybody drank wine. Everybody had wine. Everybody knew wine, okay? They all knew about it. They all loved it. And think about it. If you were living in that day of age, here's your options. Warm goat's milk, stagnant well water, or fresh, delicious wine that doesn't go bad. In fact, gets better with age. What would you carry around? What would you serve to guests when they came to your house? If you threw a wedding, would you serve jars of water or jars of wine? Of course, you'd be giving the best. This was the options. That was what they had. And so wine was everywhere. It was on every hillside. They had vineyards and grapes everywhere. It's an amazing little fruit. Because to make wine, it's really kind of simple. You crush up the grapes. Oh, somebody else is talking. You crush up the grapes, and the natural yeast on the skin of the grapes breaks down the sugars in the grapes. And as long as you give it time and space, the fermentation process begins, and it'll create wine. This thing that lasts. This new thing. It's not really a fruit anymore. It's this new creation. During that process, though, there's a gas buildup. This carbon dioxide gas gets released from that fermentation process. And if you put it inside of something that can't expand or can't release that gas, eventually what will happen? It'll burst. It'll blow up. You might see this if you've pickled. If you store something you're pickling in a jar that is sealed tight, the glass jar is just going to shatter. It's going to explode. Because their gas builds up so quickly inside. So you have to have these special tops. You have to buy special canning systems that can release that gas. But back then, they had kind of two options. You could put them into clay jars that you couldn't seal, and so flies could get in and all sorts of things. Or you could take an animal and a dead goat or pig or some kind of animal, you wouldn't do pig, dead goat or sheep, and you would take its skins, you'd shave it, you'd bring it dry, make it into leather, and you'd sew it up. And the cool thing about skin is elastic. It can grow, it can expand, it can stretch. And so when you pour wine into a new wineskin, it would look something like this, but as the wine began to ferment, that skin would expand and it would stretch, and you never knew exactly what it would look like at the end. Sometimes you have a big bubble on one side, sometimes it would all bubble up at the top, sometimes it would bubble down at the bottom, but it would stretch and it would expand and it would fit the wine. It would grow to the size it needed to fit the gases inside of the wine. Then you would drink it, you'd pour it out, and you'd empty that wine out of that. But that skin would now have these bumps. You see, once the gas is gone, the skin doesn't go back to the way it was. I don't have to tell you guys about saggy skin. We all know. It just won't go back. Same problem. And so you couldn't take that wineskin and do that process again. You couldn't pour new wine into an old wineskin because when the gases started to bubble up, it had no places to go. The elasticity in the skin had already stretched to its max, so the next time it tries to stretch at all, it would rip open, and the wine would pour out on the floor, and the wineskin would be ruined. So what is Jesus talking about? He's saying, you can't have me and just pour me into your old way of thinking. There needs to be a new thing that I'm poured into. You can't take Pharisees, you can't take Jesus and apply him to your Pharisaical laws and make it work. No, I'm bringing something completely new. Sinner, you can't go on living your life of sin and just add a little bit of Jesus to it. It doesn't work. It's going to burst. Instead, you have to pour me into a new wineskin. You have to be a new creation. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone and the new is here. Jesus wants to change everything in us. And you cannot take your preformed ideas and add a little bit of Jesus to them. That's not going to work. You can't bring your politics to Jesus and say, Jesus, if you could just fit right in here to the way I'm already believing the world should work, that would be great. No, Jesus wants to come in and he wants to completely reshape the way you see the world. You can't take your views on life, marriage, relationships, raising children, and just apply a little bit of Jesus into it and say, as long, Jesus, as you don't mess with any of this stuff, we're good. Because Jesus likes to get in there. He likes to fill those little bubbles. He likes to get into those places that you don't want him in. And if you're not willing to give him access, if you're not willing to let him into those places that need to be transformed and changed, it's not going to work. This is why so many people get really, really passionate and excited about Jesus. And as soon as he starts getting into those places that they don't want him to touch, maybe it's our wallets. When Jesus starts challenging the way we spend our money, maybe it's our free time. When Jesus starts telling us, hey, you know what? Maybe going out every Saturday night and partying isn't the best idea. Maybe it's not good for you. When Jesus starts interfering in our relationships, when he starts saying, hey, you know what? Maybe you should marry her. Maybe you need to stop dragging her along. Maybe you need to commit. All of a sudden we go, I don't know about this Jesus thing anymore. When he starts messing with the way that we're raising our kids and he says, you know what, stop yelling at your kids all the time. Give them a break. They're kids. Yeah, you yell 5% less than your dad did. That's not what Jesus is calling you to. He's not calling you to be 5% better than the worst it can be. He's calling you to be a new creation, to be a new wineskin, that he can do whatever he needs to. We all have areas. I could continue naming areas that we have locked off to Jesus. And let me tell you, until you open up in those areas, he can't do everything he wants to do in you. He can't change you the way he wants to. He can't transform you. He's not going to have access to do the amazing things in your life that he is capable of doing until you open up those areas. But here's the thing, Jesus is worth leaving everything else behind. You will never once, I have never met a person who told me they regretted giving their life to Christ. I have never met a person who said, my life just got so much worse when I started committing my life to Jesus. I have never met someone who said, my biggest regret in life is that one Sunday I told Jesus he can have control. Jesus is worth leaving everything behind. It was worth it for Levi. Levi became poor. Levi became a wanderer. Levi became, in the end, he became a martyr. It was worth it for Levi to have, it was worth selling everything he had to buy the one thing he found. And that was the love of Jesus in his life. To know that he belongs, to know that he is loved, to know that his sins do not define him, but Jesus' acceptance is all he needed. Jesus wants to do something totally new in your life. He wants to do something that is worth more than anything else, but he needs you to become something new so that he can pour himself into you. And that means opening yourself up. That means letting him have control. That means letting him speak. It means doing hard things. It means hard conversations. It means dealing with big, deep, dark issues. But it begins with the simple act that Levi did, an invitation to follow. Jesus said 2 words to Levi that changed his life. Follow me. Jesus is saying those same 2 words for you. Are you going to follow him? Are you going to accept his lead? Are you going to walk with him? Are you going to sit with him? Are you going to listen to him? In the good, in the bad, in the great times, and the horrible times, are you going to follow him? If you do, it means you need to leave everything else behind. All your preconceived ideas, all your preconceived notions about how the world's supposed to work, leave it all at the door, leave it all at the tax booth, and go follow him. Are you willing to accept Jesus' invitation to follow him? Maybe you made that decision a long time ago. Well, the next question you have to ask yourself, if you're supposed to look and act like Jesus, are you willing to sit in the house of your tax collector? Are you willing to go and have a meal with the person that you consider the worst? The worst kind of filth? The worst kind of person? We all have different definitions. For me, anybody who hurts a kid, the worst. Can't imagine. It's just the worst. Am I willing to sit at a table with them? Am I willing to see past their brokenness and believe that they can be changed and transformed, that they can become a new wineskin just like I needed to become a new wineskin? That if Jesus comes into their life and invites them to follow him, that they are just as capable as Levi of leaving their booth and following? Who are you going to sit at a table with this week? Now, I don't want to tell you to go sit with a tax collector this week, because then if you invite a friend over for dinner, it's going to be really awkward if they hear the sermon. They're going to be like, wait, you think that I'm the worst? Here's my challenge to you, though. Sit with someone this week. Invite someone to dinner. Invite someone to sit with you at lunch at work. Invite someone out, and not the person that you always go out with. Seek out your neighbor. Maybe you have a lonely neighbor who seems like a big grump. We have one of these. Maybe they are lonely. Maybe they would love to sit down and share a meal with you. Maybe it's been years since they have. Maybe it's been since before the pandemic that they got to sit at a table with someone and know that they mattered, that they're wanted, that they belong. Maybe through that simple act of mercy, you can show the love of Jesus to someone. So I challenge you, as we continue worshiping this morning, we're going to take communion. We are going to come to the table. And this is a table that all are welcome. This is a table where Jesus says, if you believe in me, you can partake. You can come to the table. You can take and you can eat and you can be and you can belong and you can take part in what I've done for you. We're going to sing a song this morning. And as we do, I want to invite you forward to come and partake of the Lord's communion, to come to his table and participate in his sacrifice, to remember the blood that he spilled and the body that was broken on your behalf so that you can be more than your sin. So you, like Levi, can become a gift from God. This is what he has for us at the table. The remembrance and the reset to know that we are still loved. Maybe you need that this week. Maybe this week has been rough. Maybe there's a part of you that just doesn't really know, am I really loved? Does Jesus really care? Come to the table, accept the gift of his sacrifice, and remember what he's done for you. As we come forward, you can come around each side of this table. You don't just come through the front. Come through each side, grab some bread, grab some juice, take it back to your seats. When we're finished with this song, this time of remembrance and this time of worship, we're going to take these elements together. And then we're going to move and go to another table. We're going to have a good time. We're going to party like the disciples partied. All right, so let's stand together. Let's take communion together, and let's worship.